Welcome to the 5-day Chief of Staff Challenge. Today is day 2. Measuring your value in a Chief of Staff role. Let's hear it now from your host, Tyler Paris.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our 5-day challenge, where in these 5 days, for half an hour each day, I'm hoping to give you some tools and tips for some of the most common challenges that Chiefs of Staff face. And also just to give you a taste of what we cover in our Chief of Staff Mastermind cohorts. And one of our current cohort members, Joshua, liked cohort 3 so much that he already signed up for cohort 4. And when he heard I was doing this challenge without being paid, he had this to say about his cohort experience.
Hi, Tyler Paris here. I'm so excited to kick off our 4th Chief of Staff Mastermind cohort, a year-long learning cohort that combines the power of Chief of Staff specific training, group and one-on-one coaching, and peer advisory. Don't just take my word for it, why it's an awesome learning opportunity. Take it from participants themselves.
And as I continue through the cohort, the other thing that this provides is a series of inflection points to think about myself, and am I growing, am I improving, am I valuing others, am I experiencing new things? So I have the stretch mindset.
Enough said. Don't miss out on astronomical ROI. Sign up for cohort 4 today and become the leader your organization needs and you want to be.
All right, thanks, Joshua. And I'm not sure if he's going to be on the call today, but today we're going to be talking about measuring the value of your work as Chief of Staff, because so much is behind the scenes. It's that coordinating, orchestrating. You may not be the lead, but you're leading from behind. And some of the things that you're working on are these big, long-term and nebulous, intractable problems that may be hard to break down into component chunks and articulate the value of. So there's lots of different aspects to this. Would love for everybody to just drop into the chat for me real quick. One activity that you do as part of your Chief of Staff role that you think is hard to measure. Bonus points if articulating that would make a really big difference for you or your team, or I guess I would say for you in your next performance review, or for your resume when it's time to move beyond the Chief of Staff role, or for your leadership team. So go ahead and drop those in, and we'll highlight a few of those.
Tyler, what's one of your number one answers you've had that's hard to measure?
I'll say one of them is building culture, and I'm going to come back to that and use that as an example in just a minute. Although it's kind of tied up in that engagement and retention piece that we talked about this morning at our monthly mixer. Another one is resolving conflict. So I have a couple good examples we can pull for that. Meeting management, alignment. Getting vertical alignment from top to bottom, from the strategy down to the tactical level work, but also across teams. I call that horizontal alignment, across functions. So it looks like, acting as a proxy, developing and fostering relationships, handling the minor fires that pop up last minute. Yep.
Daily. Thanks, Amy.
Yeah. Multiple times a day, most likely, right? Facilitating stakeholder alignment. Yep. Alignment. Prioritization. Great. I'm glad you brought that one up too. Prioritization is such a tough one. Everybody talks about it. It's really hard to do.
I like Rob's comments. You don't get points for avoiding a fire, only for fighting a fire.
Yeah, interesting enough. Great question for your leadership team sometime is, do we have an environment that makes heroes out of the firefighters? Because we might actually incent that in the organization by rewarding firefighters instead of rewarding the quiet people who just get stuff done every day and who make sure there are no fires. So creating an end-to-end approach. Love to measure effectiveness. So these are all great. I appreciate you sharing those. I think what is interesting about these is I hope that you're seeing both the variety and that in the challenges that you're facing, but also some commonalities like, oh yeah, maybe I didn't write that one, but that one resonates with me too. All the challenges you face in your daily work. The question, how do I quantify my value in a chief of staff role, is one of the ones that comes up over and over again for chiefs of staff, which is one of the reasons why we picked that as one of the 5-day challenge topics. And like any good coach, I generally answer that question with a question. And that question is, if you're not able to articulate the value of what you're working on, why are you working on it? Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just get cricket sounds when you ask people that, right? Sometimes it's because the boss said so, or sometimes it's because I haven't had time to get my head up and think about what I'm doing. I don't have that time to reflect. But, what makes the work you're doing a priority? And why is it important to work on it or solve it? And so I'm going to walk you through a quick example of taking a seemingly fuzzy task. And then we're gonna ask that question about it and show you how that unfolds, finding the value of it. And then we're going to get you into breakout rooms to wrestle through your tough to measure areas and get some peer feedback and some ideas from each other. So here's a starting example. Let's say you're working on engagement and retention for your exec. And this is top of mind for me because we just covered it in our monthly Chief of Staff Mixer this morning, but also because it's timely for a lot of you, because nearly everyone is working on something related to engagement, retention, improving their culture. How do you measure that? How do you measure the value of that work? Well, first you have to ask, why does it matter? And this kind of alludes to that question I asked a minute ago. Are people leaving? Is productivity down? Did you have a miss on a project or a deadline or a budget? Did you have to have a really painful analyst call? Knowing what the real problem is comes first. And then, let's say people are leaving. Then you can start dealing with that specific issue. So if people are leaving in your organization because of the culture problems or because of the engagement and retention issues or your employment brand, whatever that big fuzzy nebulous thing is that you're working on. If someone's leaving, let's start with the fact, do they get a severance? Because that might be one point of articulating the value of solving this problem. That's going to be a cost for you. If you think about recruitment costs, you've got recruiters drafting and posting job descriptions and the time the team's spent on giving feedback on that. You've got your costs of belonging to job boards and paying for specific postings, some of which you might do anyway, but the specific posting for someone who left might add a little cost. It's probably not your biggest one, but it could be. Screening candidates. So as a quick aside, and just to give you a sense of the scope of this, the average chief of staff role right now is garnering 800 to 1,200 applicants. Imagine the screening time just sifting through 800 to 1,200 applicants to try and see if you even have an initial phone call, see if they even look at a high level like they're worth having a next conversation with. That is mind-boggling to me. So, in a field of that many applicants for jobs, that screening time stacks up. Are you going to hire a search firm? You might as well throw the cost of that in there. If you're not, great. Those are just some of the easy, most direct costs of recruiting to measure. What about your leaders, management's, and peers' time interviewing replacement candidates? So if you took all those people's salary who have to interview a new candidate as a kind of rough hourly rate of their annual salary, if you know it, multiply that by the number of hours they spent in interviews, and you've got a close enough ballpark for a direct cost on that. What if you think about the opportunity costs of the same people not spending time driving their other priorities forward while they're preparing for conducting and following up on interviews? So, you might have your whole C-suite interviewing a candidate for a senior position. That's a lot of folks out of their day jobs doing that interviewing and giving feedback to each other and trying to work the loop. While you're at it, factor in the cost of all the people around the exited employee chipping in to do that person's job fractionally until somebody new is hired. What are the costs for training that new hire? And the time where that new employee is not fully productive because of ramp up or a lack of familiarity with the culture and how things work here. So even a quick study smart person can't know everything when they come into a new role and they've got some learning curve. And what about the lost investment you made in the previous employee, which might include their knowledge? It also might include that conference you sent them to last year, which maybe that's not the best example this year because T&E costs are way down, but it used to be a great example. If somebody went to a conference, there might be a pretty good spend on that. So if you know someone is unhappy or making plans to leave and you can persuade them to stay, or you can coach your exec or one of the leadership team to persuade their people to stay, you can start to ascertain how much money and time, or probably some other measures, you've saved the organization, right? So you kind of get the idea. You ask why it's important, and based on that, while people are leaving, in this case, what does it cost us when people leave? And so if I fix that problem, how can I start measuring that? So you might be familiar with Bernard Marr's 75 KPIs. John's going to showcase that for just a second. Just as a starting point, does this work shift one of these KPIs or help us focus on it? You probably have your own KPIs, hopefully. If not, I've seen chiefs of staff use this list of 75 KPIs to start a conversation with their exec about the 3 most important results they should be focused on, which, by the way, ties into our conversation yesterday about the value stream mapping and the 2 pie charts and where could I add value for you. And if I have 10 things on the list, which of these 3 would shift a KPI? Which of those KPIs should I be assessing that list of 10 against to know if it makes the biggest value? So you get the idea. Asking why is important so that you can get to the work of solving the right, let me say that another way. Asking why it's important to work on what you're working on or to solve it helps you get at the real value. So now that I've given you some context, let's get you into small groups to start walking that through with each other. So you walk this through, and when I say go, John's going to split you out into small groups of about 3. And what I want you to do is take 1 minute or less to quickly share your hard to articulate area. And then you'll have about 4 minutes each, maybe 3 minutes, I'll say 3 or 4 minutes each. So not a ton of time, but a little bit to explore with each other. Why is it important to solve this problem? And to glean insights and inputs from your peers. So we should be right about 15 minutes for this activity total, once 3 of you have gone, and we'll broadcast time hacks so you know when your time's wrapping up and it's time to move on to the next person. If we have time, we'll debrief as a large group. Most likely, we'll probably chat some of our takeaways. So, John, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and get folks into the breakout without further ado.
All right, Tyler, here they come. Again, you'll be put in breakout rooms. If you do get stuck in a dead room, you can move rooms. If you have any troubles, you can click Ask for Help or meet us back here in the main room. Here we go. We'll see you back in 15 minutes. All right, let's see here in the main room. Go ahead and you can click View Gallery on the top right. You can see everybody else that's here. Welcome, Rob. How are you? Amy, here. I believe Amy is here. Excellent.
Yes. Are we just joining any room or are we assigned rooms? That's what I'm not clear on.
You are assigned this room, Rob.
Oh, okay.
So let's see. I'm going to try and get these 2 people back here too. Here we go. So let's see. Who would like to start?
I'll jump in, I guess. Really, this is kind of a new role, so I'm kind of a catch-all, and it's trying to figure out really that should go to that person, not me, or that person has it really should be to me. There's so much advising and communication between so many people, we're just kind of all scattering. And how do we hone that conversation and that communication in of, okay, this should be mine, that should be yours. And I think that's just part of this being a new role and me being new in this role is why I'm struggling with it.
All right, let's take about 4 minutes, Rob. We actually have a little extra time since there's two of us, and you and I can ask some additional exploring questions.
But just to clarify, John, this exercise is about kind of exploring the why of the task, right? What's the return on investment of time and focus?
Yeah, why are you doing it, right?
Yeah. So Amy, I guess that's a good question that people can get frustrated with as a chief is trying to figure out where it goes. Are people frustrated because they're spending time on the conversation of delegation, or is it?
I think yes, it's kind of like, oh, you're doing that. Oh, I thought I was doing that, or I'm already doing that. Why are you doing that? Because we have a new leader and he's unclear of how. So again, my frustration is how can I say, look, let's assign this and these type of things to me and let me show you that I can be of value to you, because right now he's just kind of, hopping along, grabbing anybody he can. So I need to find a way to rein him in. And also me being a better advocate for myself. Hey, look, I've done this. Let me do this. Let me show you that I can do this well.
Yeah. So, I was doing the takeaways as you were talking, and it's wasted time in lack of clarity when you've got one or you got two or more people working on the same thing or not working because
exactly
they think someone else is on. And
we
then
have a saying, we have a saying that if two or more people are tasked in feeding the horse dies.
Yeah. And then the other one I had as a takeaway was, we call it hallway tasking, right? When the boss just walks by and it's like, hey, this is what I need done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously suboptimal with respect to the right talent on the right task and pulling people off of what they're doing.
Excellent. We got about 1 more minute too. So Amy, is this a task that you don't want to do, or you think we're just wasting time, or I just want to double check?
Yes, some things it's not my area of expertise, where I can do it. It may take me twice as long versus that person down the hall can do it in 30 minutes. Let me focus on something that I know needs to be done. Yes, has a definite timetable to be finished. It's just very scattered. And so you're parsing your time on multiple things versus focusing on the one thing.
Got it. Thank you, Amy. And welcome, Heather, who just joined us. Amy, if you don't mind, then we'll have Rob go here. We're at
Absolutely.
the 10 minutes to go section.
Yeah, so the issue I brought up was, and again, focusing on how do you talk about the value of what you're doing, is my boss is very focused on looking around corners, looking ahead, not being surprised. And he made the comment this week that, as we're looking back at some of our successes, you don't get credit for preventing a fire. You only get credit after the fire engulfs the house and you put it out. And so I think that's a difficulty with prevention or being ahead of the power curve is how do you show value when it's a null factor? You're saving unknown time and money on doing that.
All right, Amy, do you have any exploratory questions for Rob?
No, I love that statement about, you don't get any credit for preventing a fire, which is absolutely the truth, but you really can't go in and say, hey, look, I did this and now we're not having to do that. They're like, that's your job. But when you do it all day, every day, you kind of want to toot your own horn saying, look, this is thinking in advance, being reactive. I mean, being proactive versus being reactive is a huge skill, and it takes time to learn your boss and to learn your people and to learn the environment.
You know, it's funny. In the last call, we talked about it, Rob, which is letting people fail. Sometimes you let a fire happen on purpose, and then you prevent the fire, and then you let them know the difference and know that you did that, right? So that's one way to bring, again, we're really trying to focus on this area, hard to articulate value. Like I go back to high school. Sometimes my friends didn't articulate the value of when the gas tank was full, but when the gas tank was empty, dollars would come out, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
but
I agree. We've had that conversation about when we saw something coming, we'd highlight it with senior leadership. They would ignore. It would be a train wreck, and then you're able to come back and say, "Hey, you know, we talked about this, and you should listen next time."
Heather, do you have any either adjoining comments or questions? So we're just exploring this concept that Rob has.
I love it. Just had something at the early onset of 2022, just overly stressed, overcommitted, all at a leadership level. And there was a little bit of a feedback loop from my principal. I wish you would have raised the white flag a little sooner. And I kind of knew that was coming, and I hadn't pushed it in a while, so I tried it. It wasn't probably the best timing because it dealt with board and committee. I knew it would come together, but all of her direct reports, 6 of them were heavily involved in the start of the year and new business and just making sure that systems work. And so we were doing a literally 60-minute presentation that needed to be pulled together leading up and through the holidays. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't protected the team so much or thought it was going to work out, but yeah, it came to the top and it was noticed. But short of her saying, everyone clear your schedule, work on this and do it immediately, I don't know, maybe I was too paralyzed by the fear of we're just all stressed out.
Yes,
That's probably the hardest thing, sorry, for me to articulate was to say, you're still not hearing me. This is not going to happen if we don't stop right now.
Yeah, Heather's reminding me, if you've never watched the documentary on the Fry Festival, FRYE, which is like a classic project management problem, right? You know, at some point there was no longer any way for them to get the resources needed for this thing. And that's like, event planning is a classic project management problem. So, you know, that like there's, I always did that too when I was at Microsoft, which is, you know, if you want this to be done, what's not going to get done? And like consciously choose that. Otherwise, everyone's just like pile it on and they think everything's going to get done. Everything's priority one is like not really a good strategy. 30 seconds. Rob, do you want to recap? And then Heather, if you don't mind, you'll have an opportunity.
Yeah. So the notes I was taking were really about highlighting the value of you know, that engagement and noting when your foresight was discounted in the train wreck that happened. And that's not about saying I was right. It's about saying, let's be prepared next time. And it's really a question when you see the train wreck coming is how hard do you push to get people to act, or do you just, you know, eventually plan on recovery operations?
Well, and maybe articulate how much did that train wreck cost us?
Yeah.
Not you, it's us too. It's really, I think that's really the key. Okay, cool. Heather, we got about 5 minutes remaining. So if you want to take a minute, you can articulate something about Chief of Staff that is hard to articulate, hard to understand the value of.
Well, I think just hopping in and joining all of y'all on what you're discussing right now was something that I've been struggling with. Is not everybody's priority one is going to get done. And my spouse has been hounding me since the holidays to do a very brief dashboard and keep that in front of my principal, not just a list, but to allow that flex and swap out those priorities. And most of the priorities in the last quarter have been at a board or a committee level, which to me or to us is, you know, that has to be delivered on because that's our CEO's boss. So nothing trumps that. And just talking with this group, it's time to do the dashboard today. I have time today. I need to do it because I'm seeing little train wrecks starting to pop up because there's so much going on.
You should find train post-its. Amy and Rob, any comments?
Well, yeah, on the exercise, I guess the question is, what we're focused on, what is the value of the dashboard of priorities and prioritization, and what's the cost if it doesn't happen?
Can't track it all by email, and that's what's happened this morning. I've realized so much has gotten pushed to me from my principal, at my process or my system, and then now I'm looking at time is so tight between certain key players that need to be there. I'm like, this is going to be 4 weeks or 6 weeks out. I don't think it's what we want, right?
Yeah.
So just having that quick glance to say, these are the top 5 that I'm working on. Swap them out or they stay the same.
One of the things that we have too is like a Kanban board, right? So I don't know if you have used a Kanban board, Heather. So
Researched it.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, in concept, it can be pretty simple, which is you start on a stuff to do, and the middle is like in progress, and the right side's completed. But one of the things is, I think in your case, if you would see all these other things coming in, you could show a picture of it too. Then you just shoot some photos and do some time lapse with your own camera, and you'll see all the other projects that came in that made this other stuff not happen. I think that's kind of how you can visualize.
Don't even get me started, but yes, I love it.
Right. I think that would be one of the ways to do it. Because then you got to come back, right? That's hard to articulate. But when you say, then you start looking at lost cost of opportunity. Because you dropped these 5 things on me. Here are 5 things that was worth this much to the company we didn't do. So that's always been my strategy at Microsoft. And that was one of the ways we broke ties at Microsoft. In the early days, everybody was a shareholder. Right? Everybody, like top to bottom. And so you could say, well, that's great. We could fight a lot, but as a shareholder, we should do this. And people are like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. So that was one of the ways that I broke ties. Rob or Amy, any other insights, exploratory questions for Heather? What's this dashboard? What's one of the measurements on the dashboard? You saw the 75 KPIs scrolling on the screen. What do you think is on the dashboard?
Well, I guess when I say dashboard, not literally like KPIs, more of the project status, and a quick visual of like red, yellow, green type thing, because we're doing a 5-minute stand up and I need it to be super quick. And I don't want to be meticulously refreshing the list and losing time.
That's one part where digital can work. Especially if multiple people are on the same dashboard. So that's an idea there too.
I feel like the board suggestion, because it could be quick and it's visual and you can see the movement.
So what's the one thing, you got 20 seconds then, Heather, what's one thing you took away from this conversation?
I wish I would have been here promptly at noon.
Wish you could delegate to Rob and Amy and me.
No. I didn't know it was going to be so small and intimate. I love it.
All right, here comes everybody back. Thank you, everyone. All right, Tyler, I believe we have everybody back.
Last question. I'm not sure we'll get to it right now, but great question, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I just want you to know I'm not going to forget about it. But we're almost at time again, so would love it if you all can chat for us real quick. If there was an aha or something you took away from this session, something you're going to do differently, or if you just got stuck and you wish you could deep dive even more, go ahead and drop that in the chat. But I hope that in these 30 short minutes, we've given you a starting place to ask some questions about work that is hard to articulate the value of, and that will help you measure it. When I was chief of staff, I could point to 150K in OPEX savings in the first 6 months of my job just by prioritizing some of the work that was in our queue and telling everybody we're not going to work on this other stuff. We're going to focus on the stuff that has a higher likelihood of driving real value. We're going to just let the rest fall by the wayside. We're going to make a conscious choice to say no, and boom, focus on that. So I think many of you will find even more savings than that. And so I'm going to stay on for just a few minutes, as John put in the chat. If you want to talk more about it, I've probably got another 15 minutes or so. We can bat ideas around. I could share some other examples of how I've seen folks articulate this value. And let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. So for those of you joining us by Zoom, I'll stick around. If you're joining by live stream, I bid you adieu and great rest of your day. And we'll see you tomorrow for facilitating engaging meetings.
Thank you so much, Tyler Paris. Join us again for day 3 of Tyler Paris's Chief of